Assalamu alaikum students, welcome back. In the last session, we have seen some customs, some tradition of the primitive Indian society which were unjust to, especially to women as well as to the lower caste people. But yes, there were some people, those who believed in justice, those who believed in equality, those who wanted to reform society, and one of them was Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Let's see how did he begin changing the lives of widows. Ram Mohan Roy was particularly moved by the problem widows faced in their lives. He began a campaign against practice of sati because widows they had to face two problems. First, sati. In most of the Indian community, sati practice was mandatory, and almost all over India, where they didn't practice sati, but widow remarriage was not allowed. So he began a campaign against the practice of sati. Ram Mohan Roy was well versed in Sanskrit. He was well educated. He knew Sanskrit, Persian, and several other Indian as well as European languages. He tried to show through his willings that the practice of widow burning had no sanction in ancient text. He tried to prove with evidence of ancient text, ancient manuscripts of Hinduism. By the early 19th century, many British officials had also begun to criticize Indian traditions and customs. In the chapter we have seen, chapter number 5, the last chapter we learned, British made some changes to the Indian society. So many British officials had also begun to criticize Indian traditions and customs. They were therefore more than willing to listen Ram Mohan Roy because he was reputed to be learned man. In 1829, sati was banned ultimately. Banned by the law means a law, an act was passed, and officially sati was banned. The strategy adopted by Ram Mohan Roy was used by later reformers as well. Whenever they wished to challenge a practice that seemed harmful, they tried to find verse or sentence in the ancient sacred text, religious text. Because many times that we observe that happen, people believe about certain custom, certain tradition, and they believe that those customs and tradition are from their religion. But in fact, those are not related to religion. In fact, those customs and tradition that started by society, people themselves. So those reformers, they used technique adopted, strategy or technique adopted by Ram Mohan Roy to make people understand by giving them references of their own sacred text, religious text. They then suggested that the practice that existed at present was against early tradition. This is how they began to work. Let's take one more case regarding it. For instance, one of the most famous reformers, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, used ancient text to suggest that widow could remarry. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar was a social worker and social reformer from West Bengal, from Bengal basically that time. His suggestions was adopted by British officials and a law passed in 1856 permitting widow remarriage. As I mentioned before, in almost all the Indian community, widow remarriage was not allowed. So Ishwarchandra Vidyasagar had taken reference from ancient texts to prove that widow remarriage was permitted in ancient time. Those who were against the remarriage of widows opposed Vidyasagar and even boycotted him. By the second half of 19th century, the movement in favor of widow remarriage spread to other parts of the country. In the Telugu speaking areas in the southern region of India, like Madras presidency, that time it was presidency, like today we call state, that time presidency, British presidency. More Vira Saligam, Pantulu formed an association for widow remarriage. Around the same time, young intellectuals and reformers in Bombay pledged themselves to working for the same cause, for widow remarriage. In the north, Swami Dayanand Saraswati, also a well known social reformer, who founded the Reform Association called Arya Samaj. Like Raja Rammohn Roy formed Brahmo Samaj, Swami Dayanand Saraswati formed Arya Samaj in 1875. And main intents of Brahmo Samaj was to reform the Indian society, spite of religion, caste, community, and the main purpose served by Arya Samaj was to reform Hinduism. And Arya Samaj also supported widow remarriage. Yet the number of widows who actually remarried remained lower. Those who married were not easily accepted in society. Yes, those who were educated, they accepted, happily accepted. But those who were primitive, those who believed in their tradition, those who didn't want to break their tradition, they didn't accept them. So many conservative groups continued to oppose the new law, even that became law, but still those conservative people, those narrow mind people, those primitive people still opposed the law. Now about women, girls' education. Many of reformers felt that education for girls was necessary in order to improve the condition of women in society. Vidyasagar, Ishwarchandra Vidyasagar, in Calcutta, and many other reformers in Bombay set up school for girls, exclusive school for girls. When the first schools were opened in mid 19th century, many people were afraid of them. They feared that school would take girls away from home, prevent them from doing their domestic duty, cleaning vessels, utensils, cleaning home, taking care of family, washing clothes. Those are all traditional domestic duties allotted to women, allotted to girls. Moreover, girls had to travel through public places in order to reach school through market, through open area, through public places. They had to pass. Many people felt that this would have a corrupting influence on them, bad influence. They felt that girls should stay away from public spaces. Therefore, throughout the 19th century, most educated women were taught at home by liberal fathers and husbands. Those people believe that women should stay away from public places. They were not allowed to go. They were not allowed to even attend some public events. However, few of women got education with the help of father and husband, but that also at home. Sometimes women taught themselves, like Yashasundri Devi. Yashasundri Devi, I think she was in your syllabus, last year's syllabus. Yashasundri Devi, yes, I remember. She was one of those who secretly learned to read and write because getting education was forbidden for many women in most of the communities. So they secretly learned. She was one of those who secretly learned to read and write in flickering light of candles at night when all people slept, when no one at home. In the latter part of the century, schools for girls were established by the Arya Samaj in Punjab. Arya Samaj, established by Swami Dayanand Saraswati, as well as Jyotiba Phule in Maharashtra initiated this movement and established school for girls in Maharashtra. In aristocrat Muslim households, aristocrat high level Muslim household in North India, women learn to read the Quran in Arabic, the sacred text of Islam, but in Arabic. They were taught by women who came home to teach. Maktab and madrasa were not there for women, so women came to home to teach. Some reformers, such as Mumtaz Ali, reinterpreted verses from the Quran to argue women's education. Because tradition believed that women were not allowed to get education. But she translated, Mumtaz Ali translated verses of Quran and proven that in Quran women's education, girls' education is totally allowed. So, the first Urdu novels began to be written from the late 19th century. Amongst other things, these were meant to encourage women to read about religion and domestic management in the language they could understand. So, this is about girls began going to school. More women began to write about themselves. Women write about women. From the early 20th century, Muslim women like the Begums of Bhopal played notable role in promoting education among women. They founded a primary school for girls in Aligarh. Another remarkable woman, Begum Rokeya Shekhawat Hussain, started school for Muslim girls in Patna and Calcutta. She was fearless critic of conservative idea. She opposed conservative idea, arguing that religious leader of every faith accorded an inferior place to women, and somehow she is right. She opposed. No matter it's about Muslim society or Hindu society, though conservative people believe women as inferior, they treat women as inferior in society. By the 1880s, Indian women began to enter in universities. Some of them trained to be doctors, some became teachers. Many women began to write and publish their critical views on the place of women in society. Means they got higher level education, university education, and they began to write about their place, write about other women in the Indian society. Tarabai Singde, a woman educated at home in Pune, published a book, Stri, Stri Purushatuna, Stree Purusha Tulna, a comparison between women and men. Stree Purusha Tulna, criticizing the social difference between man and women. More about the reformation in Indian society we will discuss in the next session. Stay tuned. Thank you so much.